Hello and welcome to the Drive Formula podcast, where we take trust, communication, and action to accelerate your team from 0 to 60. My name is Marcus Williams. This is Eric Lichty. And today is our deep dive into Chapter 7 of the book, Driving Engagement. So if you haven't picked up a copy of your book, you can pick it up online wherever you buy books. If you prefer to listen, awesome. We're so glad that you're here, whether you're watching on a video site or listening on a podcast site. Please subscribe, follow us. That's the best thing that you can do to help us. Also, we encourage you to purchase the book so that you can go back and look things over. You can highlight, you can take notes, or if you just know you're a listener, you're an audible learner and not a visual learner, buy the book for a friend who you think needs to hear it or read it or learn about the things that we're teaching, the principles in the book here. So last week was our pure audiobook version of Chapter 7, and today we will take a deep dive, talk a little bit more about the principles in this chapter, how they connect with the other chapters, and maybe add a few extra stories and insights to the chapter. So let's just jump right into Chapter 7, labeled Keeping It Running. And the first question it asks is, what kind of driver are you?
Yeah, this is interesting because how much demand do you want out of your employees? If you're a car, take my 16-year-old son, for instance. He demands a ton out of every car he drives.
Yep, sure.
Lots of gas, lots of brake. He loves to even hear the car rev up. So my daughter told me the other day, he puts it in neutral and will sit there and rev the engine. I'm like, wow. No wonder gas mileage sucks, But that's kind of leaders. I mean, do they really see how much demand they're putting on their employees, that they don't give them work-life balance? They burn them out. I've told a story before about this person that had this van that was giving him every sign that it was going to blow up. And then she said, well, why did it do it?
Yeah.
Because it was smoking. The check engine light was flashing. It was overheating. It gave him every sign to say, I'm done. Take me in for maintenance.
Right. I was talking to a friend last night who said he's exhausted. His team at work is facing a deadline, so they're putting in more hours, which is natural. But he said they let go 2 members of his team not that long ago, and they haven't replaced him. So now they're expecting him and the other members of the team to do the work of the other 2 members and meet the exact same deadline they had with the team of +2. And that's just, you wouldn't do that with your car. It wouldn't work. And you can't just, and I think that happens in business all the time, especially in economic times like these where everyone's trying to cut back a little bit. So they cut back by downgrading or letting employees go, but they're not cutting back on their services or expectations. And so instead they just drive the employees they keep into the ground.
Well, and even if they offer you a financial incentive, a person can only take so much stress.
Yeah.
I've got a good friend that he actually had a stroke in November because of the stress that he was under. And he was maybe in late 40s, early 50s, that affected him for the next 2 months. And he's just barely getting over it, that he feels normal again. I mean, that's just not possible. But why, as leaders, do you think that is? I mean, just because you have a deadline, that's where communication comes in. And tell the person that did have the deadline, we at the car shop, sometimes right now I cannot physically get a part that I need to get replaced on a car. There's 4,000 on national back order through the dealership. 4,000. I physically cannot fix that car. So what am I going to do? Tell the customer, well, it's just not going to be possible. But he's only trying to get it past emissions. Luckily, it's only a little sensor that doesn't have anything with it running, but it turns the check engine light so he can't pass emissions. So there is a way around it. There's always a solution, but you have to communicate. Have to.
Right. Absolutely. And the way the chapter looks at it, are you the type of person who, like my dad, who has the membership to the car wash and goes, 3 times a week, spotless car all the time? Are you the person who uses their car, does the maintenance that needs to be done, but still, like, it's a machine that you use and you're not babying it? Or are you the person who drives that car into the ground and you just drive it until it dies and then get a new one? Just like they're just disposable items. You have to really self-evaluate as a leader. What kind of leader are you? Are you babying them to the point where there's no expectations at all, so you're getting no production? Are you conscious of what they can and can't do and doing that maintenance and balance as you go and really keeping an eye on things? Or are you just driving them into the ground until they quit and then hiring someone else like they're expendable? What kind of leader are you?
Well, and if you look at the other downside to, if you do end up burning them out and just say, give me another person, that person to get trained and to get back into where you need them to be, it's going to take 4 to 6 months. Why not?
A lot of money.
And a lot of money to be able to hire and to find the right person. Where you already have that somebody's trained, why not just simply appreciate them, give them the time that they need? I mean, you still have expectations, but employees can have expectations on leaders as well.
Right. Is killing your team or killing your engine worth whatever success you're trying to achieve? So in the case of my friend, is meeting that one deadline worth the potential of everyone quitting? Is that really worth it in the long run? And you're building a brand. Your product, your service is a brand, and part of that brand is how your employees feel about your brand, about your company, because word spreads, word gets out. A former employee says, don't buy from them. They treat their employees like crap. That gets around. You're going to lose customers as you lose employees. Those two are interconnected.
And something that we're actually coming up with is a sales training to teach people how to get a customer for life. Well, the same principle applies to this. If you want to retain your employees, look at the long term. People are human beings. Things happen. And if you don't learn to adapt to those situations without making it stressful or putting too much burden on somebody else, you're not going to be able to keep the loyalty with your employees. And you're not going to be able to, make your promises to your customers. So the best thing is stop, take a minute, reflect what you really need to do, make a game plan, and go on. We watch it in sports all the time. All the time. So to not even put it in a car situation. All the time. We do it in sports. My brother, I helped him to go on a trip the other day, and he's like, the bearings don't need to be greased on his wheel bearings on his trailer. Well, about 2 months ago, I was driving to another city, and all of a sudden this trailer jumped up. The wheel came flying off right in front of me. My daughter looks at me, well, what are you going to do? I was like, I'm just going to watch the wheel go down the road. But the trailer, it shot off the side and had no wheel on it. We followed that wheel for a good 1.5 miles. It was kind of funny. And then all of a sudden it bounced off the shoulder and went off. Did he do his preventative maintenance to be able to make sure those bearings were greased? It's a very, very simple system that it just has to have grease. My brother, he's like, no, it should be good. The guy before said it was, well, that was 5 years ago when he bought it.
Right.
I pulled it apart. It didn't have any grease on the bearings. I'm like, buddy, you're going to California from Utah on this? No, let's hurry and do the bearings. Half hour, let's just make sure it's right. All right.
A very simple job that possibly prevented a catastrophe.
Yeah, and he's like, I don't want my wheel to fall off. Well, what are you going to do to grease the bearings?
Yeah. Especially not on that drive when you're out in the middle of the desert.
Yeah.
And there's no one around to help for hours. How many times have you heard people say they feel more like a number at work than a human being? We get that when we're talking to employees and customers all the time. That is probably one of the most common complaints we hear from employees is I feel like a number. They don't actually care about me. Do you? Right? Are you willing to have them feel that way? And then what motivation do they have to do their best work if they just feel like they're a number? That at any time they're expendable at any time. You could just change the numbers around, and they no longer have a job. Why do the best that they can do? There's no motivation there other than personal pride. And in the next chapter, where we talk directly to employees, that's something that we talk about, that employees have a responsibility for their own work and their own personal pride. But it's really difficult to maintain that day after day when you know nobody at your job appreciates you or cares about you, and you're just a number.
Nope. And it's, as a leader, that's part of your responsibilities, is to look at the environment, look at the emotions, watch body language. Because honestly, as an employee, you don't want to go up and say that I'm about burned out. You want to continue to achieve. But as a leader, you've got to see what they're doing, how they're acting. Are they smiling? Are they, drinking more coffee, more energy drinks? I mean, what are they doing at work that is giving you a physical sign of body language that you need to pick up on? I had a good person I was talking to the other day, and this person loved her job. She actually told me, I hate Fridays because I feel like I'm just in the process of being in my job and being really, really going, and I'm just in my process. And then all of a sudden Saturday comes and I'm not sure what to do. I'm like, wow, never heard that.
And that's a change.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. But her leader saw that her whole persona, her whole life is her job. Do you know what that leader did? Made her go to 410s because she was on a salary position working 50 hours a week, and said, you need a little bit of work-life balance. What an awesome leader. She got a 3-day weekend out of it and never even asked. And she's like, I'm not even sure what to do now with a 3-day weekend. I'm like, great, get some hobbies, have work-life balance. So leaders, you can do it, but you have to look at the signs.
Yeah, and one of the most common mistakes that I see is there's always, every team's got their high achievers and their low achievers. That's just human nature. And so leaders tend to depend on or lean on the high achievers most. And I was guilty of this as well. It happens all the time, where you end up giving the most important projects, the most important difficult tasks to your high achiever, so they get loaded down, and they're not the ones who are going to come to you and complain that they're feeling stressed. They're going to come to you one day and give you 2 weeks notice because they found another job. And then you've lost your best employee, your high achiever, because you just you gave them way too much. And even though they love their work and they're good at it, they see the fact that you're letting the low achiever just skate by, and that you're loading them up with all the work while you let the other people skate by. And it's just, the simple fact of it is it's just not fair. But you're driving their car into the ground while you're babying the other car. And you have to treat everyone individually to get the most out of them, to get their best productivity. But you have to realize that they all see that. They can all see how you're treating each one of them, and that may come to backfire on you.
Yep. So, but you know what? We're all human beings. We shouldn't ever be treated like a number and a machine. Automobiles are awesome machines that do a ton for us. We change their oils, we watch for their lights, we watch for all these things, but they still are not a person. A person has feelings. They need a sense of accomplishment. They are the professional in their industry, and that's why you hired them. Why not just appreciate them and create the right work environment to help them to thrive?
Yeah, absolutely. And another, I think, mistake or thing, when we're talking about basically using employees, driving them into the ground, is salaried employees, not allowing them to have balance, not allowing them to have home. You get this attitude of, well, they're on salary, so therefore I own them all the time. They're on call all the time. I can call them, I can text them, I can email them because I'm paying them on salary. And that's difficult. And frankly, employee, especially in the younger generation, they're fighting back against that. They are just refusing to answer calls. They're refusing to answer emails when they're not at work. And frankly, I agree with them.
Yeah.
If you have whether it's a 40-hour expectation, whether it's a 30 or a 60, it doesn't matter what your primary expectation is. That's what that's what the salary is paying for. The salary is not paying for nonstop. And if you break it down,
own them.
right, you don't own them. And the funny thing is when it comes to them taking time off, when vacation time or sick time, you calculate that down to the hour. Suddenly their salary becomes hourly. You divide it, you figure out what their hourly wage is, and you subtract that from their paycheck. Every company does. But when it comes time to when you want them, suddenly they're on salary, and the hourly doesn't count. Well, if you want them on call 24/7, then you take that hourly wage that you've figured out, and you times that by 24 times 365.
Yeah.
And that's what you should be paying them if that's your expectation. And employees are revolting. We went through the industrial the industrial revolution where basically the 40-hour work week was first implemented and defined, and now we're in the information age and the gig economy where that no longer really applies, and your workers know that. They know if they can get a project done in 30 hours, then that's all they should have to work, because that's their expectation. So being very clear with your expectation and communication, and just don't take advantage of them and say, use that excuse. That doesn't fly. It's lame. It doesn't fly. Nobody's buying that a salary is making a slave of a person.
No. I actually had a person tell me once that if their boss emailed them in the middle of the night, first thing in the morning at 6, they would have to respond or be in trouble.
No.
that was ridiculous. I'm like, whoa, really? And that's honest. I'm not making that up.
Unless their start time is 4:30, so that they have an hour and a half at work to respond to emails.
Yeah.
Okay, but
I was just like, that's not right. Really, an employee, as a leader, you should be the one that is powering them up at, if they start at 9 o'clock, you're turning that key on. You're saying, okay, I'm going to help create the right environment to have you thrive. You are here for the next 8 to 9 hours. I'm going to do everything to make sure the environment's there for you to thrive as an employee. At the end of that day, off just like you do a car. Your expectations, your demand on them, everything is shut off.
And does that mean there aren't emergency times? Of course not. There are times when, especially when there's a deadline or something, but that is communicated. That's okay guys, we're coming up on a deadline. We need to meet these marks in order to meet our deadline, and if we don't, we're going to have to stay later. So this, that's motivation to get your work done now rather than later. But that's communicated, and that's a limited time thing. And then once that deadline's hit, you go back to your normal way of thinking. We actually talked about that in a later chapter, whether you're like race mode or and so we'll get into that later. But we're not saying that it can never happen, but it can't become the norm.
No.
You can't have that expectation that you can call someone, and I've had that all the time where I've been in a job and they knew I was on vacation. I was camping. I'm in the woods to relax, and I had a signal. I should have gone further into the woods.
Uh-huh.
And I get that email saying, I need you to respond to this right now. Do you really? And your emergency, your lack of preparation doesn't create an emergency for me, however that saying goes.
Yeah, it constitutes emergency on my part.
Yeah.
I went on a cruise in January. They're like, do you want the Wi-Fi program? No. It is heavenly for me to be out of cell service. Yeah. I do not, I'm on vacation, and I really don't want to answer a car question or, hey, I have an emergency or this, that. No, I'm on vacation, and I put my phone down, and I was done. It was seriously heavenly to me.
So nice. Yeah.
So,
absolutely. I talk about, in the chapter, we talk about a car that I had that my father-in-law had as a mechanic, and it had gone over 500,000 miles. Well, I have that car. It's parked at my house again because we're going to drive it up to Canada for him. So it's now over 600,000 miles.
Wow.
Not all the lights on the dash work. That when the gas needle hits 3/4 that it's empty, so that it's showing some signs, but it's still running.
It's an individual.
Yeah, it's over 600,000 miles, and it's still going because he has taken immaculate care of it. Not just the engine, but when he dropped it off, it was washed and shampooed.
Wow.
And to me, it's a 600,000. That's just a junker you drive around. But for him, he's taken care of that, and he's gotten every single mile out of that thing that you could possibly imagine, and his expectation is it's going to last for years to come.
And that's the one you're taking on a long drive soon, right?
Yeah.
Well, and there's the trust for you, right?
Yep, I know he's done a good job in taking care of it. So
that's great. But that's what you can honestly expect out of employees, is if you take care of them and you treat them right, you create the right environment that they can thrive. They're not ever scared or threatened or intimidated, and never have anger. I mean, it's amazing what people can do. People are absolutely awesome if you create the right environment for them to thrive.
Absolutely. So really, just like the rest of this book, this takes a lot of self-reflection and some harsh honesty with yourself. So this may not be something that you are comfortable talking to someone else about, because you have to admit your failings or your weaknesses. But really think about how you drive your employees, what you expect out of them, and are you driving them into the ground for your own personal gain, or are you creating an environment where they can thrive, be engaged, and fulfilled, leading to longer-term success?
Yep. Just appreciate people. People are great. So, but we do need to communicate it more and tell them that they're doing a good job, rather than always being negative.
And that seems to be a common theme in these conversations, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's awful.
And tell them you appreciate them.
Yeah, I worked as a firefighter EMT, and we went out on the streets constantly in not good environments sometimes. I mean, I was in house fires. I was on the highway. I actually had an EMT that drove backwards on the freeway going where the traffic was going southbound, and he started going northbound from an emergency thing. I was scared for my life, and luckily that person got disciplined and was not on the ambulance anymore, because that was absolutely wrong. But I never felt appreciated ever in that, except by the patients and how we helped them and their families. That was where I got the reward from, but never from my leaders, ever.
And you can only sustain that for so long.
Yeah.
Before it's too much.
Yep.
So, all right, folks. So that's our deep dive into Chapter 7. Again, please subscribe, whatever service you're listening on, app, website, whatever, so that you can catch next week's episode, which will be a reading of Chapter 8, so just the pure audiobook portion of Chapter 8. And if you haven't listened to the rest of the book, it's all there from Chapter 1 on. We've got the chapter, a deep dive, all the way up here to Chapter 7. So check it out. And if you are having issues at your workplace, or you would like some additional training, you want some training on the principles taught in the Drive Formula for you or your team, let us know. Reach out to us, and we'd love to come and help you out. If you have any comments or questions about what we've talked about today, leave those in the comment section, and we will be sure to address those in our next deep dive episode. Thanks for watching or listening.
Have a great day.